My daughter said something to me on the phone last spring that I haven't stopped thinking about. I'd called to tell her something I'd been sitting with for a few days, something that mattered to me. And she picked up distracted, the way she always does, half her attention somewhere else entirely. I got about 40 seconds in before she said it. "Dad, I really can't get into this right now. I'm Walt. I'm 82 years old, and I spent most of my life believing that if you kept your head down, did the work, provided what was needed, that was enough. That respect would just follow from that, like it was part of the arrangement. It wasn't. And I didn't figure that out until I was standing in my kitchen holding a phone that had already gone quiet on the other end, realizing I had absolutely no idea what to say next. The thing about being ignored by your own children is that it doesn't feel like one big event. It's not a door slamming. It's more like a slow leak. First, it's the short calls. Then it's the calls that stop happening at all unless they need something. Then it's a Sunday dinner where you say something and nobody really picks it up, and the conversation just moves on without you. And you tell yourself that's fine, that people get busy, that this is what getting old looks like. I told myself that for a long time. Laura was always the one I felt it with most. She remembers things clearly, things that were said, things that weren't. We'd had distance between us for years, the kind that builds up from too many conversations left unfinished. But in the last couple of years, it had gotten quieter in a way that felt deliberate. I'd call, she'd answer. We'd talk for 3 minutes about the surface of things, and then she'd have somewhere to be. Rachel was different. She'd call more often, but when I said something she didn't like, she'd just steamroll past it, talk faster, change the subject. She was never cold, just relentless, like listening was something she'd get around to eventually. And I didn't know what to do with any of it, because the only tools I had were the old ones. Keep the peace, don't make a scene, let it go. Those tools had built my whole life. They had also, I was beginning to understand, cost me pieces of it. The first thing I tried was just saying it directly. I remember the specific afternoon. Rachel had called, talked for 20 minutes about a problem with her youngest, then said she had to go right as I started to say something about my week. I said, "I feel like you don't actually want to hear from me unless you need something." I thought that was honest. I thought that was brave, even. She got very quiet, and then she said carefully, "Dad, that's not fair. I have a lot going on right now. I can't be everything to everyone." And somehow, within about 45 seconds, I was the one apologizing. I'm not even sure how that happened, but it did, and she called less that month. So honesty, unframed, without any structure around it, it didn't work. It just handed her something to defend against. The second approach I tried was silence, not as a tactic, just out of exhaustion. I stopped calling Laura for about 6 weeks. Told myself if she wanted a relationship with me, she knew where I was. She's not a child. She has my number. She called twice in that time, once to ask if I still had her grandmother's recipe box somewhere in the house, and once to tell me about a work situation in a way that made clear she wanted agreement, not conversation. When I finally did call her, she sounded genuinely surprised, like she hadn't noticed the gap at all. That's when I understood something I probably should have seen sooner. Silence, when the other person doesn't register it, isn't a signal. It's just absence. You disappear and the world keeps moving. The gap doesn't teach anyone anything because they never knew the gap was there. I felt more invisible after 6 weeks of that than I had before I started. Now, I have to tell you about Thomas, because this is actually where the story turns. Thomas lives next door. He's about 38, auto mechanic, single father to a 9-year-old named Lucas. We don't talk much. We've never had what you'd call a real conversation. But he borrowed a ratchet set from me last fall, and he returned it with a nod and a "Thanks, Walt," and that was that. That spring, this was about 3 weeks after the phone call with Laura, I was in the garage doing nothing in particular. I'd pulled out the old workbench to oil the drawer tracks, which is the kind of project a man invents when he has too much quiet time and not enough direction. Lucas wandered over. He does that sometimes. Just shows up, doesn't explain himself, stands there, watching. I ignored him for a while. Then I asked him if he wanted to hand me the rag that was sitting on the shelf. He handed it to me without a word. We worked like that for about 20 minutes. Him passing things, me doing things that didn't really need doing. At some point he said, "My dad doesn't let me help when he's working." I said, "Why's that?" He thought about it. "Probably so I don't break anything." I said, "That makes sense." He nodded very seriously, like I'd confirmed something important. I kept working. He kept standing there. And I thought about Laura and Rachel and what it was that I actually wanted from them. Not the surface version of the answer, which was for them to call more, listen better, treat me like I had something worth saying. The deeper version. I wanted to not feel like a problem they were managing. Here's the thing I had never done. Not once in 82 years, not with Linda, not with my kids, not at the factory when a foreman spoke to me like I was furniture. I had never said out loud, in the moment, calmly and without anger, "Here is what just happened, and here is what I need instead." I had complained. I had gone quiet. I had brought it up later, too late, with too much weight on it, so it always felt like an accusation rather than a correction. My brother Rob called it banking it, letting things pile up until the interest was too high. He wasn't wrong. I sat with that for a few days, and I started trying to think about what it would actually sound like to say the thing in the moment. Not heated, not wounded, just clear. The closest I came to a model for it was my father, of all people, and not in a good way. When my father wanted something done differently, he said so immediately. No drama, no history. He named the thing. He stated what he expected. He moved on. It was cold, the way he did it. There was no warmth in it. But the clarity, that part worked. You always knew exactly where you stood. I had spent my whole life reacting against his coldness by going the other direction, holding things in, letting things pass, being the easygoing one. What I'd never tried was taking his clarity and adding something human to it. Rachel called on a Tuesday. She was in the middle of a story about her neighbor's fence dispute before I'd even said hello. I listened for a while. She was funny about it, she always is. Then there was a pause, and I said something about a dream I'd had about Linda the night before. Just a small thing, one sentence. She said, "Oh yeah?" and kept going with the fence story. I felt it happen. That familiar sensation of something in me going sideways. The old instinct rising up. Just let it go, Walt. She's in the middle of something, it doesn't matter. But I let it sit for exactly 3 seconds, and then I said something I had never said before. "Rachel, I was saying something just now." She paused. "What?" "I said I had a dream about your mother last night, and you moved past it." Silence. Not the charged silence of a fight starting, just a still silence, like she'd stopped. "I'm not angry," I said. "I just want you to know that it matters when you let that pass." A long beat. Then she said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I did that." She asked me about the dream. We talked about Linda for 20 minutes, not efficiently, not with somewhere to be, just two people remembering someone. I don't know that I've ever felt more like her father than I did in that conversation. Here is what I want to be careful about, because I've thought about it a lot since. It wasn't a technique. I'm not built for techniques. I spent 40 years on a factory floor around men who could see through anything that felt rehearsed, and I absorbed that. The moment something sounds prepared, people hear the mechanism instead of the person. What it was slower. It was learning to say the true thing at the right time, not an hour later from behind a wall of hurt. I'd always told myself that not making noise was dignity, that swallowing things was strength. I was wrong about that. There's a version of dignity that isn't silent. It's calm, but it's present. It says, what just happened is not how I want to be spoken to, and I'm going to say so now, plainly, and then I'm going to let you respond. That's it. No history dragged into it. No, after everything I've done, no guilt. Just the present moment, named clearly. With Laura, it took longer. She's more guarded, more likely to shut down than flare up. The first time I said something directly, I think it was, "Laura, I notice you're already somewhere else in this conversation." She got quiet for days. But she called back, and the call was different. She said, "I didn't know you noticed things like that." I said, "I notice most things. I just never used to say them." I'll be honest about something. There were about 3 weeks in the middle of all this where I thought I was just making everything worse. Rachel seemed cautious around me. Laura wasn't calling. Daniel, my oldest, had picked up on something had shifted, and he was doing what Daniel does, which is wait until he understands the situation before he engages with it. I'm going to sound ridiculous here, but the only thing that kept me going was Lucas. He'd come over twice a week now, uninvited, no explanation, and stand around while I did whatever I was doing in the garage. He'd started asking questions, not big ones. What's this part called? What does this tool do? And one afternoon he said something that landed on me sideways. He said, "My teacher told Marcus his answer was wrong in front of everybody. He didn't say anything. I said something." I said, "What'd you say?" He thought about it. I said that it wasn't a good way to talk to someone, in front of everyone. I looked at him for a second, 9 years old. "What happened?" I asked. He shrugged. She apologized. I went back to what I was doing, but I was thinking about it. A 9-year-old figured out, without ceremony, without years of silence first, that naming the thing in the moment was just the right thing to do. Not brave, not risky, just correct. I was 82 years old, and I was just now getting there. 6 weeks after the conversation about Linda's dream, Rachel called on a Sunday, not for anything, just called. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing important, her youngest, a show she'd been watching, something she'd read. At the end, she said, "Dad, I like calling you lately." I said, "Yeah?" She said, "You seem different, more present." I didn't explain it, just said, "I've been working on a few things." What I was actually thinking was, I'm not different. I'm just finally here. Because that had been the problem all along, hadn't it? Not that my children were dismissing me, or not only that. It was that for years I had half dismissed myself, gone quiet before they even had a chance to hear me, accepted less than what I needed and called it maturity. When you start treating your own words like they might be worth something, when you say them clearly and hold steady while the other person decides what to do, something in the dynamic shifts. Not because you've outmaneuvered anyone, just because you've stopped making yourself smaller than you are. Laura called last month. She called to tell me about something that had happened at work, something that had actually upset her. Not asking for advice, just telling me. It was the kind of call she used to make to Linda a long time ago. When she finished, I said, "I'm glad you called." She said, "I don't know why I hadn't been." I do know why, but I didn't say it. Because some things you let come to people in their own time. I'm sitting here now in the kitchen, the lights going down outside, same as it does every evening, the yard going that flat gold color it gets in late afternoon. There's a car in Thomas's driveway, Lucas's bike on its side near the fence. I've been in this kitchen a long time, more years than most people have been alive. I think about Linda sometimes and what she would make of all this. She was the one who always said I kept too much in. She'd say, "Walt, the words don't wear out if you use them." I didn't know what she meant for a long time. I thought she was talking about affection, about the kind of softness I wasn't built for. But she wasn't. She was talking about this, The simple act of saying the true thing when it happens, without letting it age into resentment, without letting it harden into distance. I'm grateful I figured that out, even this late. I'm grateful for Rachel on Sunday afternoons, for Laura calling the way she used to, for the smaller moments that accumulate into something that doesn't have a name but feels, if I'm being honest, like being known. That's not nothing at 82. That's not nothing at any age. Thank you for sitting with me today. If something I said stayed with you, if you're carrying something similar, something you haven't found the words for yet, I'd be glad to have you back. That's all this is. An old man talking through things slowly, in a kitchen, at the end of the day. If you want to sit with me again, I'll be here. Take care of yourself, whatever that means to you.